Oh,
Morning, good afternoon for some of you, depending on where you are in the world, country. So today we're going to start a new series talking about resilience and what that really is. Resilience is really just the body's way to bounce back from challenges and difficulty. So the more resilient you are, the easier it is for your body to manage things and come back from things like illness and injuries and challenges that go on. Working out the gym and how quickly your body bounces back from doing new exercises and higher weights and things like that. So we're going to be talking about the resilience as a series over the next couple of weeks, talking about very specific areas of where resilience comes into play. And today we're going to talk about how resilience connects with issues of food. So we're going to be taking this apart a little bit. So Anthony was going to talk a little bit more about which specific foods can help with resilience and what nutrients are really necessary for the body to be most resilient. But what we typically see and who we typically work with are more high performance, achieving women as a whole, and how to bring back resilience so that they don't get into a burnout state. I just saw yesterday that CNBC they just put up an article talking about resilience and burnout for women, specifically women that are leaders, corporate executives, and people who are at higher levels of engagement. And what they found is in 2023, 46% of women who were leaving high-level executive positions were leaving because of burnout. And burnout's an actual diagnosis. Anthony and I were talking about this last week. It's a legit diagnosis that gets a diagnostic code to put onto your insurance company to be paying to go see professionals to help when you've got this diagnosis of burnout. But it's basically when you've depleted the body to the point, emotionally, mentally, and physically, where it can't get into its resilient state. It can't bounce back. It's literally, it's burned out all its resources. So we deal with a lot of clients who are in a burnout stage or a near burnout stage, who they've pushed for so long that they didn't realize what was going on. And Anthony and I talk about this a lot. We talk about the boiling frog syndrome, which is where if you threw a frog into a boiling pot of water, of course that frog would know better and he would jump out. But if you put a frog into room temperature water and ever so often you just tick up the temperature by another degree, and you do it over the course of time, what ends up happening is, sadly, the frog will boil to death because the frog didn't notice the increase in temperature because it was so slight. And so many of our clients, so many, especially high-performing women, are at this stage of they're teetering on burnout, or they're in a burnout stage because they are the frog in the water situation where the temperature had been rising and they hadn't noticed it. So they're taking on the next thing. They're taking on another project at work. They're taking on what's going on and coaching their kids' soccer team. They're taking on handling issues for older parents who need support. They're taking on the needs of their spouse. They're taking on the needs of their friends and their coworkers and everyone else around them. And their resources have been depleted. And then coupled with the fact that most of our clients are in a stage where they're in their late 30s and 50s, this is the time when women, men too, but women especially, are going through this very dramatic, sometimes, transfer in life. We are going into a shift in hormones. We're going into perimenopausal, menopausal stages, where some of those menopausal issues, the perimenopausal, could have been hitting you in your 30s and you didn't realize it. So this is impacting the thyroid and the gut and digestion and nutrient absorption. It's affecting how our hormones know to balance properly. So it's having an impact on our on energy levels and putting a lot of people into serious fatigue and even slight fatigue. So now they're leaning on caffeine and they're leaning on other things to help them get through what they used to be able to get through. Now they're struggling because they've taken on the weight of everything else.
that's where it usually starts. That's where red flag number one is, when you're relying on coffee, or even chewing coffee grinds just to get as much caffeine or anything to keep you going through the day with, the society we live in, where there's a lot of pressure and stress to get everything done ASAP. A lot of people will rely on not only caffeine, but what are some of the other nicotine seems to be
that's a big
popular
thing that we
now.
see now. People are chewing nicotine gum to get through
Not
their
even
days.
not just smoking cigarettes,
Yeah.
just like taking nicotine gum.
Yeah,
or
we're
whatever.
seeing more and more of this push because we have to keep up. We have to keep going. And women especially, we still are in a space where we feel like we have to work twice as hard as men typically do, and we have to do it, backwards and in heels. The whole joke and the quote from Ginger Rogers, who said, "Yeah, I did everything that Fred Astaire did, but I also did it going backwards, and I did it in high heels." So this idea that women still are in a space where we feel like we have to take on twice as much, we have to do more, and our bodies are not handling it. We're hitting walls, we're hitting burnout stages, we are really struggling. So this pushes us more into issues of anxiety and depression and overwhelm. So if you want to see more resilience, you have to make sure you work with the body and not against it. And a lot of people are turning to pharmaceuticals to get through what's going on in their bodies, which is long-term actually depleting your ability to be resilient as well, because it's coming from the outside and it's circumventing your body's natural ability to find resilience. And now your body is fighting that too. So I know you wanted to talk a little bit more about the food specifically, and I know you have some specific foods that I know you see as more support for resilience, but I don't know if you want to talk in more of a general, because, of course, with our clients, it depends on where you are in your journey, what's the best diet for you, but there are some foods that typically are best for most.
Yeah, I was going to talk more about specific foods, since you mentioned resilience essentially is how fast you recover or rebound from a physical event, a highly emotionally charged event, whatever it may be. So I was going to talk about some foods that support those glands or systems, like the immune system, the adrenals, stuff like that. So let me start with some foods or nutrients, but whenever possible, we always recommend to get nutrients from food just because there's synergy there, rather than taking a supplement. And supplements have their place, and sometimes it's maybe the best way, like for vitamin D, for example, which happens to be a nutrient that helps support the immune system. To get vitamin D in really high amounts, it can be a challenge from food, especially for me being plant-based. It's, I don't want to say impossible, but it's nearly impossible to get medicinal amounts of vitamin D, for example, through food. But for nutrients, and I'll give you the nutrient, and then I'll give you the food that at least has respectable or very high amounts of that nutrient. So I'm going to start first with the immune system. So nutrients, foods that support the immune system are vitamin A. Now, most people think carrots or orange fruits and vegetables have vitamin A, which technically is not true. They contain beta carotene, which your body converts into vitamin A with the help of zinc. But what's cool about that is you can crank in the beta carotene all day and it's not toxic. But true vitamin A, which is called retinol, that you can get from cod liver oil, is one of the highest sources of retinol, like true vitamin A.
It's so delicious.
And usually you'll see supplements, like if you're getting true vitamin A, it's cod liver oil. But that could be toxic. So any fat-soluble vitamin, vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K, arguably B12, the fat-soluble vitamins, you just want to be mindful, because they can store, as the name says, store in the body and become toxic at a certain point if they're at high levels for a sustained period of time. So vitamin A, carrots is an amazing source of beta carotene. which converts into a retinol or true vitamin A with the help of zinc. Zinc happens to be another nutrient as well that is very supportive of the immune system. And high food sources of that are grass-fed beef, very high. There's pumpkin seeds, which has respectable amounts of zinc in them. There's oysters, which is the highest food source of zinc. And most people, if oysters aren't palatable for you or it's just not an option, then grass-fed beef might be, or pumpkin seeds are good sources. Lamb is a pretty decent source.
Lamb.
Also one of Kirsten's favorite. Then, as I mentioned, vitamin D. So vitamin D is challenging to get. One of the higher food sources of vitamin D is mushrooms, but the amounts are so low, you'd have to eat an awful lot of mushrooms to get anything recognizable. So vitamin D, in the short end of it, it may be something you consider supplementing with it if you're not already. How much to supplement with, that it's hard to give generalizations because it really depends. Some clients of ours are supplemented with 5,000 IUs a day. Some are 1,000 IUs a day. It just really depends on where your levels are and digestive, what's the word I'm looking for? How well your digestive system is.
Bioavailable?
Absorption. Well, I was looking more for integrity. I was looking, so gut integrity. So, if you're dealing with leaky gut or just digestive issues, low stomach acid production, things like that, that can impact nutrient absorption. So that's why it really depends. But I will tell you this: the optimal range for vitamin D, if you get blood work tested, which I recommend because of vitamin D's role not only in the immune system, but also in, most people know it helps with bone health. It helps with cardiovascular health, and vitamin D is anti-inflammatory. But the optimal ranges are between 50 and 90. So, if you're below that, you may need to add some. If you're either in that 90th area, you may want to dial it back a little bit. I like to see it at 70, but that's the range. Vitamin E is also good for immune. Highest food source of that is sunflower seeds, very high source of vitamin E. Vitamin K is also awesome, and most people don't know our bodies actually make vitamin K in the gut. Our gut bacteria make vitamin K, vitamin B12, I think it's vitamin B6. It's either B5 or B6, just from eating plants. And plants have, and I'm not saying we all have to go vegan, but plants we really feel should be the majority of people's nutrition. And plants contain fiber, which is really important to gut integrity and overall health, besides helping us poop. And so the gut bacteria make certain nutrients as well. For the adrenals, vitamin C is really good. So citrus, most people know citrus is great for vitamin C, but there are higher sources of vitamin C, like bell peppers, for example, is really high. And I think it's papaya is like the highest food, besides some really unique, like camu berry is really high, but you're not going to walk into your local grocery store and find camu berry. It's usually in a supplement or powder form. But vitamin C is really supportive. Again, vitamin D as well, and vitamin K are really supportive. Calcium is another good one, and that works in conjunction with vitamin D. If you ever wonder why they put vitamin D in milk, is because our bodies can't absorb calcium without vitamin D. And one of the highest sources of vitamin D is, we're not fans of dairy, though most doctors and
you mean sources of calcium?
Sources of calcium are dairy. Dairy is a good source of calcium, no doubt, but we're not a fan of dairy because we find there's way more drawbacks than benefits. So all green
Isn't
leafy.
the calcium not as bioavailable in dairy
Yeah,
as it is in the green
that I
leafy?
hear, right. That I hear too. In other words, your body will absorb and be able to utilize the calcium from the plants more than from dairy. I mean, even organic dairy, we just still find there's more drawbacks than benefits from that. And the the plant with the highest amount of calcium is collard greens.
Which
Has
you
just as much.
eat like every
Yeah,
single night. I just can't get
we're
myself there. I
growing in our
can't.
little garden.
Yeah.
But all green leafies will have respectable amounts of calcium. So there you go. There's just basically some of the top nutrients that the adrenals and immune system depend on, and the foods that you can get really good amounts of nutrients from.
And you were correct about the papaya. It's really high up there. And
Yeah.
I know it also has zinc and some calcium, I think, in papaya. So
Mhm.
papaya can be a really amazing one. And then I also want to circle back as well to the beef and the lamb. The really important thing, and hopefully you guys caught this when Anthony was mentioning those, he was mentioning grass-fed beef, not standard beef. And I'm going to go a step ahead and a little bit further on that and say grass finished. The biggest challenge right now with food labeling is that it's confusing. And there are a lot of things that sound great,
Some of that's
like
by
the word
design.
natural. It is 100% by design. It's by the marketers. And, I'm in marketing too, of course, to get our promotion and information out there. So I appreciate the concept behind what they're doing, trying to get their products out there. However, there's a lot of misleading going on in some of the things that you'll see, especially on meat. So you got to be very, very, very careful. A lot of what we talk about, we're going to be talking about like the highest form or the best form of the foods that we're talking about. So we're always talking about organic. We're always talking about grass-fed and finished. We're always talking about, the meats that are treated the most humanely, the best, because they will actually be higher in nutritional value as well. And you're not getting the level of stress in these things as you would be getting in these animals that you would be getting in the K-fed?
CAFO,
CAFO.
combined, animal feeding organization, I think it is. Do you want to explain the difference between grass fed and grass finished?
Yeah, so here's the thing. Grass-fed is when the animal's been fed almost all of its life. Up until the last 30 days, it can be fed, it's fed grass. It's not fed corn and some of the things that they're feeding to a lot of these other animals, which is not natural for their digestive systems to take in. So animals that are not grass-fed are struggling with the foods that they're eating and causing digestive issues, which means that they're constantly getting antibiotics and other pharmaceuticals to keep them from having a lot of problems. So if you're not eating grass finished, you are absolutely eating a whole lot of other troubles and problems from the animal, including a lot of antibiotics and other medications that they're giving these animals on a regular basis, and hormones and hormones and hormones and so many hormones that are out of balance because these animals are being put in situations that are not good for them. So they're in fear and it's causing their hormones to be completely train wrecks. So when you're not eating grass finished or you're not eating more organic meats, that's the thing you're up against. The second piece to that is when it's grass fed, the last 30 days, they're allowed to feed them foods like corn and other things to fatten them up. I know. So their whole lives, they've been fed grass. They're doing great. They're avoiding all the antibiotics, all of the things. In the last 30 days of their existence, they are then fattened up and they're allowed to be fed some things that we wouldn't say are ideal for that particular animal's digestive system. But it's still better than if it wasn't grass-fed at all. Now, grass-finished means that they completed their life cycle on grass, on foods that are better for their system. They're not eating the corns, they're not eating the wheat, they're not eating things that are dangerous and challenging for their digestive systems. So you want to be really, really, really cautious, especially when you're eating meats. Things like fish, when they're saying it's, I was in a very respectable large chain restaurant, high level restaurant, and they had on the menu organic
Salmon.
fish, salmon. And I was like, that's not a thing. So I asked the waiter, I said, how is it that you have organic? Like, what does that even mean? That's not a term. That's not a thing. And he said, oh, it's because the fish are fed organic food. And like, so they're farm raised. And he was like, I don't know, but they're organic. And so here's where you're starting to see some of these terms tossed into the mix. There isn't a thing known as organic fish because if they're not farmed, then they should be in the wild. So you're looking for more wild caught is what you're leaning towards when it thinks is fish. There's a lot of discrepancy right now over animals being free range and what that means. And it means that they are not literally standing on top of each other when it comes to chickens. So there's a lot going on there. With chicken, you're going to want to lean more towards organic. So there's a lot of terms. The word term natural means that the item, the food, and you usually see this on bags of things, the natural popcorn or natural chips. What that means only is that the original product was naturally sourced, but they can do whatever they want to the product after that. So they could take it into a lab and mess with it and still say it's a naturally sourced food. So it's getting challenging, and you want to start questioning things. What does that actually mean? But at least right now, grass-fed finished is more ideal and optimal. You're looking for things that are more organic. You're looking for things that are not farm when it's fish, farm raised. You want them to be wild caught. So
my favorite with labeling,
yeah,
and I'm not making this up. I've seen apples that say now gluten-free.
I know, and you're like, they should be gluten-free. If they're not, we got a whole other problem. But most food is actually naturally free from gluten. So, I mean, if you look at most food, it's where they're adding the gluten into things.
Yeah.
You know, there's no tree that you're just, ripping food off of that had gluten in it. There's nothing in the ground. Like there's a whole nother level to this, right? So overall, if your food is healthier when it gets to your plate, if the food has less stress, whether it's an animal or it's actually honestly a plant, there's no chemicals, there's no additional pieces put in there, there's no additives as far as antibiotics and hormones and other things added into the foods, your chances of your resilience going up are much higher because you're putting less stress on your body and your system. So you really want to look at this. How organic am I sticking? How high quality is the meats that I am eating if you're going to choose to eat meat? There's a lot in this. So Anthony really supported today. Support the foods that are going to support you best. Make sure they're supporting your immune system. Make sure they're supporting the adrenal function. And make sure that they're supporting your body as a whole. More plants, whether you're fully plant-based or not, but most of your plate, this is coming from a woman who still eats meat, most of your plate should be filled with vegetables with a side of meat, a tiny amount of meat, 3, 4, 5 ounces of meat per sitting, maybe 10 to 12 a day at most, should be coming out of your meat sources. The rest should be plants and beans and lovely things that grow naturally without all of the chemicals.
Yeah, of course, this is, not taking any allergies or sensitivities into consideration. Of course, respect those, but just in general, more plants and not as much meat, or for me, it's no meat, and I get plenty of protein because I never get asked, where do you get your protein from?
No, that never happens ever.
Yeah,
but again, we found you got to
protein
find
a day on plants.
I know, and he pulls it off. We see very rarely do we see truly healthy plant-based only eaters because they don't know how to make it work best for them. Mm-hmm. So we typically don't necessarily start with that with our clients. But what we do see is that more plants, the better. The older you are, the more plants are going to make your life better, and especially if you're older than, 25. 25 is where the height of your hydrochloric acid kicks in. And every 10 years from there, it depletes by 25%. So the older we are, the lower our hydrochloric acid is. So the less meat we are adding into our diets, the better we are, because the hydrochloric acid is really important to that. But more plants as you get older.
Yeah, actually, it's because your hydrochloric acid is being lower, you actually need to increase protein to get the same amount. So as we age, that's where enzymes come in handy to help with the breakdown of protein, and possibly other enzymes like betaine and pepsin so we still get all the amino acids, if that makes sense.
Right, but we're not necessarily increasing our meat at that point. We're not.
Yeah, well, you would need, right. Regardless, just generally, we would need to get, as we age, within reason, as we age, we need to increase our protein intake.
Yeah. But again, with meat, it gets challenging because you have to make sure you understand where your protein intake comes from. Are you digesting the food properly? But again, more plants, more plants, more plants, more plants.
Yeah, meat's harder to break down, no doubt.
It is, no matter how old we are. But if you look at your plate, how many colors are you seeing? How many varieties are you seeing of things that have fiber in them, protein in them, good fats in them? There's a great easy way to determine whether you're eating the right amount of nutrients as well, or enough different types of nutrients, is to look at your plate on any given day and ask yourself, how many different colors do I see? Each of those colors represents different nutrients. So each, like purples represent very specific nutrients. Oranges represent specific nutrients, and opposite colors. And when I found this out, I was like, what? But opposite colors, you guys remember back to being in art class when you were a kid and you remember the color wheel. If you look at opposite colors, like orange is opposite from purple, orange and blue are also opposite colors as well. You start to see this. Those opposite colors, like red and green, they help you absorb the nutrition in the other color. So there's certain foods that go together really well because nature put them together for them to do well, like things like basil and strawberry or basil and tomato. It's red and green. There's nutrients in the tomato that are better absorbed when the nutrients from the basil is there, and there's nutrients in the basil that is better absorbed when the tomato is there. So there's all these really cool things that you start realizing that nature didn't think we needed to go back to science class or become nutritionists to understand food. She made it very easy. If the colors make sense to each other, if it's pretty, if it goes together, it makes more sense to our systems and how we digest and how we absorb. So support your nutrition, and you will support your resilience. You'll be able to bounce back faster from challenges that you put yourself through physically, mentally, and emotionally. And the more balanced you are, I mean, that's the goal of our system, right? Our goal of our system is to find the balance, is to find that homeostasis. And when you are out of balance and you are being more challenged and your body can recover from, you can go into a state of the diagnosed burnout. And we see more and more and more people going into burnout, men and women, but women, especially the ages of 35 to 55, because they are struggling. On top of that, they are compiling on perimenopausal symptoms and menopausal symptoms as the body's learning its way into a new phase of life. And the more stressed you are, the harder that phase is going to be. So
there's a question. Someone asked a question. I've never heard of pasture-raised meat. I've heard of pasture-raised or pastured eggs, but someone's asking if there's a difference between pasture-raised beef and grass-fed.
Yes. Let me just look up the term exactly, because this is the other thing. We're seeing this more and more and more, where we're seeing new terms pop out all the time. And it sounds great, right? So pasture-raised should be in conjunction with grass-fed, but I don't know enough about the terminology and what they're being used in to understand that. So I would say start looking at what the term means, because we're seeing this more and more, where somebody's like, what's pasture-raised meat? It should be a significant portion of their nutrition should have been out in pastures, normally foraging to find what it is that they need to be eating, rather than just throwing corn and wheat at their feet and letting them eat it in a way that is not natural for them. But out in the pasture, you should be allowing them to do what naturally would have happened. And it takes longer. So here's the other challenge that we see. And Anthony and I were just watching another, of course, because we're always watching something, documentary on a pasture-raised, grass-fed farmer, talking about how he raises his cattle. And what it does for the environment is it helps to actually spread out the animals a little bit more, and we're not getting quite the what do we call it, the load of all the burping and farting all in the same place, which is actually doing a lot. The animals burping and farting are
Methane.
causing the problem with the methane. It's causing a problem with the environment. So that's a whole other story. But the cattle that are raised where they're more pasture fed and or grass fed, it takes them longer to get up to a size where they would be able to be utilized for food production.
All right. Plus, digestively, they have to be doing better.
Yeah, they're doing much better. But the reason you don't see everybody doing it this way is because it takes more land to be able to pull it off.
It's more expensive.
It's more expensive to do it this way. The feed is more expensive. Everything's more expensive, and it takes longer for the animal to reach its maturity.
Not as much yield, because with grain, they're going to get fatter. If they're on grain their whole life, they're going to get fatter.
So it's going to cost more. It's going to be a whole nother level. But we shouldn't be eating beef at the level that we are eating in this country. They are clearing out rainforests at this point I'm not kidding, clearing out rainforests to put cattle on there just to feed the United States.
Yep.
And that's absurd. So less is more in this case. But I'm thinking, and again, what I just quickly looked, it's pasture raised and grass fed seem to be utilized interchangeably, but I don't know enough about that term to speak intelligently on it there. So other questions on that?
Yeah, not that. Do you see the other question from Deborah Smith? So Deborah Smith, you got it?
Yeah. So the color thing about the veggies, you should be able to just look this up. So the question is, what about the colors in the veggies and the nutrients? That's one that I learned so many eons ago, and I've just kind of gone from there. You should be able to Google that one pretty quickly and ask. Orange typically represents more of that beta carotene that Anthony was talking about a little while ago. The carotenoids,
antioxidants.
Yep. The purple, I know you know purple too. Off the top of your head
more anthocyanins. Which are very anti-inflammatory. So that, like, we have purple when I almost said when Carrot and I go shopping. When Kirsten and I go shopping, we get a bag of carrots that come with orange, yellow, and purple ones. We love the purple carrots. They're beautiful inside, but anything purple, carrots, potatoes, blueberries, blackberries, they're super high in antioxidants.
Yeah. So, and then you'll see, naturally, you don't see the color blue in food. Now, people argue, oh, well, they're in blueberries. Blueberries are not actually blue. If you look at them, they're more on that purple side. Mm-hmm. So blue is typically a color that nature shows you that you shouldn't be eating something because it has gone bad. So that's why you see blue cheese. That's actually mold, right? Like, that's mold on the cheese. So this is the body's way, or nature's way, of telling the body, don't eat this, avoid this. And so Debbie, you were saying that, the opposites. Yeah, again, that was something I learned a long time ago and started putting together on my own, because there are things like Anthony was mentioning, things like calcium to be absorbed properly. You need things like magnesium and vitamin D to help you absorb those things. There are also other nutrients and other foods that need a buddy to be more absorbable. Fat-soluble vitamins need more fats to be absorbable, things like that. So if you start really kind of pulling all this apart and you started breaking this down, which really is ridiculous that we would have to break things down to this level, right? Then, that's why nature is like, let me just put colors out there and make it easy for you. But if you start looking at the different nutrients and you look at what their buddies need to be, or what other nutrients need to be available for those nutrients to be absorbed properly, you can start then putting it together with, where are the colors in the foods that have these particular high levels of nutrition? And then you'll also see some foods just naturally have those things also in them. So like Anthony was talking about papaya, and he was saying how it's a really high form of vitamin C. It also has zinc in it, right? So nature was like, oh, I'll kick you some help over here too. And when you eat this whole food, all the pieces in this whole food will help you absorb that nutrition as well. So
as reduction scientists, what we do is, reduction, I'm not one, but I'd love to talk to one day, is what reduction science does, though, is they take the carrot, for example, they extract out the beta carotene and they sell that. Meanwhile, there are dozens of other compounds in the carrot or the whole food that work synergistically with all these other compounds that has a much more medicinal effect on the body than just taking an individual nutrient.
Right. So even things like eggs, which we could argue whether eggs are good or bad for you all day long. But when you look at an egg, the whites in the eggs and the yellows in the eggs have some components in each of them that help the other one maximize the nutrition of the egg as a whole. So separating them into two different parts are not making them as effective as they would be if you were eating the egg as a whole from a nutrient standpoint. So this is where nature got it right, and where we're back to, and we didn't even mention this, but whole foods are better than broken down foods, so to speak. So if you're eating an apple, eat the apple. Don't eat a piece, like just don't take the apple apart. Like actually, arguably, the juice of the apple is not as effective as the apple as a whole, because now you've taken out the fiber and you've taken out some of the other nutrients actually that go into like the skin and things like that. So you want a whole food. This is where this starts to get super complicated. Like you start to see breakdowns of proteins, and now you're just getting pea protein, but they're taking a piece of the pea out, which is just the protein, and you're missing some of the other benefits. Like applesauce is still a whole food. It's just been smashed, right? But if you're extracting just the juice, I'm not saying don't drink juice. I'm just saying you're missing out. But then if you're eating processed foods, so now this is where we're taking it to a whole nother level. You're eating a food that's over processed. They're taking that food apart and putting it in a form that isn't necessarily as effective. This is why we're seeing people really struggle with things like cassava flour, which cassava isn't inherently a bad thing for us. It's a plant, and there's lots of great nutritional value to it. However, because there's so many of us that have challenges or are trying to avoid eating things with wheat in it, we still like our crackers, and we still like our baked goods, and we still like those things. So, the food community went out and said, well, what can we do to make this same product, the same bread or chip without the gluten or without the corn sometimes? So then they found this product, this cassava root, and they broke it down and they made it into a flour, and then they put it in place of these other things. And then they created products, and those products are awesome because they're replacement of the other products. However, our bodies weren't necessarily designed to take in that amount of cassava, because if we ate it just in this root form, we would not be able to take in that much. We wouldn't be able to eat it. So it's causing a lot of trouble for a lot of our clients we see across the board, where they're eating too much of it, more than their body was originally designed to handle. And now it's causing things like constipation, bloating, because it's not digestible at that level the way we were designed to digest. So people are coming back and they're saying, but I'm eating gluten-free and I'm eating the way you said to. But when we see the amount of replacement foods that they're eating in a form that it wasn't originally designed in nature to be eaten, we start to see other challenges there too. So I know I just kind of went off on a little bit of a tangent on that, but we're back to organic, grass-fed, grass-finished, all of the things, and as many whole foods in their original state as possible, and not broken down into these split forms of the food so that you can eat at a level that your body wasn't designed to eat at, right? So lean into organic, lean into colors, lean into grass-fed finished, lean into pasture-raised, apparently with this, which I have to go back and look into detail on the description or the definition of that, and eat more whole foods. Also eat as many foods as you possibly can that are in season where you live. That will be better. And the more organic you eat, the easier it will be to find things that are in season, because you won't necessarily see organic food out of season the way that you see conventionally grown food. You can see almost all year round for the most part out of season, because you're going to see higher nutrient values and absorption rates and all of that in the in-season, organic, grass-fed, grass-finished options. So, all right. Anything else?
Nope.
Okay, you guys have fun with your food, put your resilience back online, really start strengthening that resilience so that you can bounce back from the challenges that you're up against physically, mentally, and emotionally. And we will see you next week to continue this conversation.